Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. The mainstream American comic book industry can't do anything but embarrass itself in recent times. They don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand heroes. They are just pushing a political agenda. They're hiring absolute garbage based off what boxes they tick. Nobody seems to be bothered about their craft. People that do seem to be living in absolute fear of being cancelled by the Whisper Network or just the group of harpies that seem to want to descend and Me Too anyone at any time, regardless of whether or not they've got any actual evidence to substantiate it. It's just about starting it, of course. What an absolute filth-ridden industry it is. And back in day, when I used to love this industry, when I was back in the 90s, picking up my comics, there were writers which I absolutely adored. Alan Grant, Jeff Loeb, Jeff Johns, of course, and Chuck Dixon. Chuck Dixon was like a huge one for me. I just absolutely loved his work. You saw Chuck Dixon on a comic, you knew that you were in for a good ride. You knew that there was going to be good writing, good character development, good action. The guy was just absolute monster. He really was. And he was put on so many different titles to work on because of how good he is. And the industry is worse off for not having somebody like Chuck Dixon in it right now. But he doesn't politically align with the bunch of assholes which are currently running it. The echo chamber, which is currently running it. The talentless bollocks that's currently running it. He doesn't align with that. But somebody decided to ask Chuck on his channel why Manga is wiping the floor with American comics. And he gives just such a beautiful, concise answer that annihilates everything that's going on in mainstream, modern, Western comics. And just by how he phrases it, you can tell that there's no going back. That there's no way that they can turn around. They can turn this around. There has to be an absolute paradigm shift in the industry, and that's a clear out of all the box ticking garbage. You know, your Vida Ayalas and such. Get rid of that fucking nonsense. Get rid of that noise. Just, you know, fucking average, boring crap all day, every day. And actually put people who are interested in a craft, who love their craft, who have ideas. The politics don't come into it. It's about entertaining. It's about putting out a variety of product for you, the reader. So let's get into some of what he said. Whereas he was asked, why is Manga wiping the floor with comics? He answered, it's not too hard to figure out, really. By the way, this is from Bounding Into Comics and John F. Trent. So please do go check it out, folks. There's a lot of dedication, passion, and craft in manga comics. And that's missing almost entirely from the big two. Obviously, from the opening, which I've just given you, I think we can all agree that that's an absolute. There just doesn't seem to be any passion, creativity, or any of that anymore. There's a lot of box ticking. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of patting people on the back who can't sell a comic to save their lives. And the vast majority of these pieces of shit who are in the industry are purely there to try and make a stepping stone into Netflix or getting some sort of TV deal where the product which they put forward will ultimately fail miserably because it didn't sell a freaking comic in the first place. Marvel and DC still run the show here. They are still the market leaders, and unfortunately, there is no variety there. There's nothing really different. There's not something for everyone the way it is in manga. It's not hard to see. The artwork is attractive. He's referring to Manga here. It's different. It's engaging. It's interesting. It's varied. So there's a lot of reasons to like manga and not a whole lot of reasons to like what's out now, because what's out now for the big two is for the most part poorly crafted. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's poorly crafted, poorly conceived. There's an obvious political agenda to everything, and there's no variety. It's wonderful. I mean, I know that, you know, Chuck will probably never work for DC or Marvel again, which is, you know, to the detriment of those companies. But it's just so beautiful and refreshing to hear somebody who is an absolute legend in the industry, who's been there and done that multiple times over, who's written some of the biggest comics that DC's had out there, who was the co-creator of Bane alongside Graham Nolan, of course, who co-created Birds of Prey when it originally came out, to be able to step up and just be honest. He then goes on to explain the variety that manga has. In Japanese manga, there's golf comics. There's not one comic about golf. There's multiple comics about golf. He continued, and I've made reference on these videos to one of my favorite mangas is about fishing. It's just about fishing. It's not about vampires fishing on another planet, or witches fishing, or fishing after a zombie apocalypse. Although that does sound pretty cool, I must confess. This is about guys fishing. Surf casting and whatever. Fishing from boats, fishing from the shore, fishing from the banks of rivers. And the stories are fascinating, beautifully drawn, and beautifully realized. He then contrasted that with the American comics. But here, what do we get? We get superheroes and poorly done superheroes. There really isn't anything else at the mainstream companies. It's superheroes, superheroes, superheroes. And they are all avatars for the writer's political agenda, and they're kind of tiresome. I'm beginning to think that Chuck Dixon's my spirit animal right now. I'll try and get Chuck and Graham together for a stream. That'd be amazing. They are not particularly well drawn, and they're not particularly well realized. And he's absolutely correct. It doesn't matter what comic you seemingly want to pick up nowadays. It's agenda, it's agenda, it's agenda. And we know from Marvel Phase 4, the MCU going forward, it's agenda, 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 agenda. What do you hear from the press when they talk about films like Black Widow, which has just come out? Agenda, 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 agenda. And the word tiresome is absolutely perfect. And it's so tiresome and it's so boring. Now, how is that meant to attract anyone? Somebody like me who's a lifelong comic reader, superhero fan, and I'm just, you know, I'm doing it for work. That's the only reason why I'm doing it. If I wasn't watching Black Widow for doing videos and talking about it on other streams and stuff, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. Gary from Nerdrotic put a video out before he went to see Black Widow with his son, his 15-year-old son, who is the perfect age to get hooked into this marketplace when you have a company that's actually looking to grab an audience, but they're not, because it's just political agenda. And what did Gary's 15-year-old son say when Gary said, hey, let's go to the cinema? He said, I don't want to go. I'd say that that's what your target audience thinks, but I kind of think that you think your target audience is some mid-40s suburban third wave feminist. So, you know, maybe you're just like, this is not for you. Let's carry on, shall we? Dixon then questioned, why would you want to read this crap? Which is perfect. If you had a choice of reading a genre that you prefer to be in, horror, mystery, espionage, golf, then there's only one flavor in American comics. Of course, Japanese comics are going to win the day. Yeah, you want an American comic, you can either get gay propaganda or superheroes. So I think there are two genres in American comics. He went on, the biggest problem here is that all I see American comic book creators the people in the mainstream do is complain about manga. Well, we recently saw that, didn't we, with Power Girls creator, Punisher's creator, complaining about anime titties. Yes, that's what they were complaining about. Well, why don't you learn from manga? Why don't you look at what manga is doing and do that? And I don't mean draw people with huge eyes and lots of speed lines. I mean, do more varied stories, do more complex stories, put more effort into the artwork, put more effort into the craft. Chuck, you're saying all the right things, but I think you're preaching to an audience that just doesn't give two shits. Change the format, for God's sake. Stop doing the little folio comics and look at what manga does. These big, fat telephone books, comics released weekly, things like that. Just change the formula. Look what manga is doing. Why is manga successful? And try to copy that. But he did caveat that, and which I think we can all guess with. Of course, if they try to copy it, just like they did in the 90s here in the United States, they'd just get it all wrong. They don't know what they're doing, and they have no interest. They're just going to complain about it, as if that's going to get them any more readers. Exactly. They're being propped up by manga right now. They're trying to say that because manga's successful, that makes us a success, which is stupid, because your numbers are going down and down and down, so you're not a success at all. Just because you're in the same industry as something that is successful doesn't mean that that success is passed to you. That is the most dumb logic I've ever heard in my life. And then, as we've seen it, like we just mentioned, in recent times, people are starting to complain about manga. Oh, no, manga needs to change. Manga needs to be more like we are. No, manga's the successful one. You're the failure. Manga needs to be as different from you as humanly possible. And that's why it is winning, because it is. Ay, chihuahua. It's so sad. It's a sad state of affairs, but everyone saw it coming. It had to happen. There has to be winners and losers. As the American comic book sales fall, something has to replace it, and manga is right there. It's popular. I know my kids who know, my kids know kids who read manga. They don't just know anyone who reads American comics. And the kids that my kids know who read manga are just casual readers. They're not fans. They're not geeks. They're not going to conventions. They just like reading manga. They like reading it on their phone. They like reading it in a book. And there you go. I don't see the mainstream, the big two, ever catching up, although there are alternatives, he concluded. This is a big load of common sense by Chuck Dixon there, but the American mainstream industry isn't looking to change at all. In actual fact, I don't even think that it's looking for an audience past what the writers can personally garner from it, which is some sort of book deal, some sort of Netflix deal or whatever. But all those years ago, 10 years ago or so, when Gail Simone said, we can afford to lose some of these white dudes, you can't afford to lose any of your audience, ever. Because the moment you think it's okay to lose them, and you tell them that, as she did, then they'll walk out that door happily. And you haven't been able to stem it. You haven't been able to stem that loss of customers time and again because you're not giving them what they want. And you never will. Not while this regime is currently in power. Not while these talentless box tickers are being given book after book after book to satiate your political ideology. So yeah, Chuck Dixon just annihilated the mainstream comic book industry from orbit in 4K. So I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media and YouTube for live streaming links. They're in the description box down below. I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care. Bye for now.